Take a walk around your neighborhood and you'll probably see a few help wanted signs at retailers, at coffee shops, at hotels. Ever since the pandemic, a lot of frontline businesses have struggled to get sufficient staff. So that begs the question, how can these industries better attract and retain talent in today's marketplace? This is the Culture Clinic, where my co-founder Joe and I are constantly learning from HR experts on how to build a culture where people love to work. My name is Skai, and I'm one of the co-founders here at Guusto. And today I'm joined by Shelly DaCosta, who among other positions was the former compensation and benefits manager at IKEA. We've also got Kristi Stubbs joining us for the first time. Kristi is a talent advisor at Andrew Peller and was formerly a global talent acquisition manager at Starbucks. Kristi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you guys for having me today. I'm based in Prince Edward County in Ontario, and I work remotely as a talent advisor right now doing frontline hiring and supporting the teams that are doing frontline hiring. And I've been in retail, hospitality, tourism, recruitment my entire career. The biggest stretch being at Starbucks, where I led programs to help recruit and really support our teams across North America with our goals and like just big dreams that we had at Starbucks. And it was a really, really fun time there.
Awesome. All right, well, let's jump into today's topic here, Kristi. Frontline employee retention. So this should be right up your alley. What's the longest that you've ever stayed at a company and what made you stay?
Well, I guess the longest stretch I had was just over 11 years at Starbucks. I think it's almost 14 in total because I was at one point a barista in Victoria, BC. But I think I stayed because I was constantly evolving. Like I knew my path. I knew where I was headed, what my next role was going to be, or I knew that I was heading towards something if I didn't have that clear next step. So the variety kept me going. And I was always, if there was something new to launch or something new that was going to stretch me in a new way, I was ready for it. And I said, yes, I jumped all in. So I think the variety is what kept me the longest.
Awesome. And how about you, Shelly? What's the longest you've ever stayed at a company?
So for me, it would have been 15 to 16 years Hamilton Health Sciences. And similar to Kristi, why? Because like when I look back on it now, I mean, at the time I wouldn't have used those words, unfortunately, but now I look at it, it was a great value proposition. It definitely worked for me at the time. The job gave me a chance to grow, as Kristi said, a chance to learn and exceed. I moved from a coordinator role that I was first hired into to when I left, I was a director. The rewards and recognition fit my needs at the time in terms of excellent benefits and vacation. I was starting a family, wonderful maternity leave and top-ups, and an extremely supportive environment for that stage of my life, right? So the value proposition really meshed with what I needed at that time and what I wanted to give. And then to really top it off, a lot of engagement with the team and really great leadership. So it just made it really easy to stay.
So a lot of frontline roles in like retail, food services are often seen as kind of short-term jobs rather than careers. So Kristi, what can you do to change that mindset in employees?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I spent many, many years developing programs that would position retail as a career. And we would go into high schools, and we would go into colleges and universities and really educate people on the opportunity that retail and hospitality are, in that you're in this service position, you're working with people, and there's a lot of things that are really appealing about it. But I also think that there's sometimes there's this one-off person, that made it through to a director or to a district manager. It's like the storytelling has an opportunity so that people can actually see that there's a path. Like if I'm in finance and I'm going to school, I can be in a frontline job, but I know that this is my path to get to the head office, right? And so often it's this very elusive, not really sure how to get there or who to talk to or what things I need to do to develop into that other role. So I think there's a huge opportunity to just educate people on the amount of opportunity there is at so many different levels and so many different specialties and industries while staying in these service-based businesses and industries.
And Shelly, what did you specifically do maybe at IKEA when you were kind of trying to get people to think about their role kind of on the front line as a potential career?
So Kirsty's right. The storytelling is huge, and storytelling is a big part of the IKEA culture. So that was really big. People love to hear the stories of the carts worker that was now the store manager at North York, or the carts worker that was now working over in Malmo, Sweden, helping to design products, like, that they worked their way through, or the cashier that is now the head of human resources, what have you, because IKEA supported them back and forth for school and to stay in, develop, etc. So it's all about showing that career path and providing those opportunities to learn and grow. Lots of opportunities to work on projects. A new store opening. So you can work on the team that's going to be opening the new store in Vaughan, let's say. And so you're learning, you're growing, and then maybe you want to, now work for the store in Vaughan. It's just really neat opportunities. Again, providing that value proposition. And one of the biggest ones was scheduling. At IKEA, it was this commitment that if you were committed to us, if you were part-time, if you were a frontline worker, it didn't matter. You were committed to us. We were going to give you back a commitment. And that commitment was, around your rewards and recognition and good pay and things. But there was a commitment also around your schedule that I thought was fascinating, and people appreciated it so much. So we had not just kids and high school kids and university, but adults, seniors wanting to work at IKEA because they knew they could work their life around it, because they would know their schedule 2 weeks in advance. That was the commitment that the leaders made, and they had to stick to it, and they were measured on it too. So people knew what was happening. They knew their schedule. They treated them that importantly, if you will, and followed through on that commitment. And benefits as simple as like matching on RSPs and 401k, because it's like, we're concerned about your future and we're hoping your future is with us. So those kinds of things.
And I think the scheduling thing probably came out of listening to your employees about what was important to them. I'm sure you did an engagement survey or something and just kept hearing from employees like, hey, we can't stand you changing the schedule on us all the time. I can't plan my life if I've got, a part-time kind of frontline role.
Yes. That sense of I have no life because at the drop of a hat, you might call me in for a shift. And I'll feel like it'll be held against me if I was to cancel or not show up or something along those lines.
And so, Kristi, what retention strategies have you found are most effective at frontline organizations?
I think that a lot of similar strategies work for frontline that work for everybody else. Like that, I do think it sometimes we overcomplicate things a little bit, but I think that there are some barriers, right? Some challenges with this group. Like they work different hours maybe than people that are working in an office, and they have like these micro cultures from location to location, and there's communication challenges, right? Where we all might sit in a town hall or go to a boardroom and hear from a senior leader. They don't necessarily get that direct communication about the vision and the bigger goals of the business. So I think you have to realize what your barriers are, and you have to develop the retention strategies with those in mind. I think that's pretty important. I think clear communication, especially right now, like you talk about the scheduling, that creates a stability and a security for people that has a very real value right now. So I think that this clear communication and getting away from very quickly changing goals and priorities is really important for retaining staff. So if everyone is headed in one direction and the priorities are changing too quickly, which we've all seen and had to in some ways do for the last 3 years, I think that's creating a lot of burnout. And we think that's lowering performance and productivity, and it's impacting retention, because we all need a little bit of security and stability right now, for sure. I think that with recognition, I have seen it done really well, and I've seen it done not so well. And again, it's what are your barriers? Like if you don't have a common way to be able to communicate and reach everybody, if they don't have like a company email, then you need to consider that in how you're implementing recognition. If it's not if it's not leader-led recognition and it's just coming from HR, maybe that's a barrier, right? Like, I think it's really important to think about that. But I think recognition for frontline employees is so it has to be so in the moment. It has to be something that doesn't like wait till the big meeting, you know? Like, I don't know, Shelly, if you feel that, but I feel like they are so connected to their peers, their colleagues, and their immediate manager that it has to be, you know, easy to facilitate in the moment. It's different than if, you know, we're sitting behind a computer all day.
I would definitely agree. I would definitely, you know, that I think that keeping lines of communication open piece is so huge. I like to think of being able to have stay discussions with all the employees before they need to be stay discussions, you know, that free up the leaders. And this is not something that's easy to do, but free up the leaders so they have time for the employees and they're able to listen to what they need. So it's not like a formal survey. How do you feel about your schedule? You know, it's that constant back and forth, listening, talking to them. What do they need? And then implementing their suggestions and supporting them around it. Think about how you can, you know, change the work to make it more interesting or varied or enjoyable, keeping them growing and learning. And, you know, when you talk about recognition, you can think about rewarding them for staying. I've seen some organizations where they, you know, every 6 months there's something put into, you know, a pot, so to speak, in terms of sticking around and staying. And I think about the flexibility piece. You know, I think it would be so neat if retail frontline workers were where we first implemented 4-day work weeks, like for permanent. You know what I mean? And like why not start there? Because that would give them that huge advantage. You want to work 4 days a week and yet be like full time. You could do it in retail. You could do it in hospitality, right? That would just be so ingenious and say, look how important you are.
Kristi, I'm gonna come back to your comments just on recognition. I mean, obviously, here at Guusto, we're biased. Like, we believe in recognition. We are a recognition company. But tell me about. You mentioned kind of companies doing it poorly. Can you
Right.
highlight like a couple mistakes that companies will make with kind of recognition on the front line?
I think that it goes back to figuring out what is really important to them. So do they want to be recognized in front of their peers? Do they want to be recognized individually for their work? Do they, you know, I think that sometimes what I see, what I think that doesn't necessarily work when it's like a one size fits all. So there's like something that someone gets and it's done quarterly. Oh, right. Oh, yes, you can win, like get this thing, be recognized for this thing. And it's like, it's not frequent enough. It's not a habit. It's not embedded into the culture. So it's too infrequent and it's like reserved for something that's like, that was like 25 shifts ago, you know, like that, you know, I don't think that works with frontline employees. I think that what drives them is a lot of times around service and working in a team. And so I think that the recognition needs to align with that. Like, obviously the values of the company matter and it need to be brought into it. But for the most part, frontline employees are serving customers and creating these like amazing experiences for customers. And they want to be recognized for that, right? And for doing that as a team. So I think that it needs to be linked to that, what drives them and their purpose in that moment.
And you mentioned kind of quarterly not being enough. I mean, we talk to a lot of retailers that still have kind of employee of the month programs. Have you seen those done effectively, or are you kind of out on those?
I personally like more frequent recognition than employee of the month. I think, I don't know. I guess it would depend on the organization and what the employees want. Maybe there's not like a blanket answer to that one, but I think that what I really loved at Starbucks was that there was these 5 core values and there was 5 pieces of recognition that you could get that were directly aligned to those. So if you were recognizing me for being extremely welcoming with customers, then that would be a welcoming piece of recognition. But as a leader, I could also pick what I needed to support people in the different ways that they wanted to be supported. So somebody might want to like take their family out to the movies that week. And I'm like, this is perfect. and another person might want to, I don't know, save for something larger that they wanted when it came to recognition. So I liked being able to have different tools for different circumstances and being able to recognize people in a way that was very meaningful for them, right? Like, I think that's the greatest leaders, right? They see us as an individual, as a person, and they know what drives us. And so I think ideally, the recognition tools align to that and let you do that as a leader.
I love that. And I've been taking notes here. I've got some more questions about your time at Starbucks. But Shelly, what made kind of recognition work really well at IKEA?
I think it's the leaders and the understanding, the individualizing, but to kind of pull a little bit on what Kristi said about organizations where it's done poorly is where they don't understand that piece about how important the frontline staff are. And so they have a recognition program for head office or their office workers or, the behind the scenes employees. And they apply that same thing all the way through to the frontline workers. And it just doesn't work. Like, I mean, it's not appealing. It doesn't link well for them. They don't have the same access. It doesn't jive timing wise, and it doesn't fit the values for that group. And so that's where I think the biggest kind of mistake is. Whereas at, for example, IKEA, it was really important. People understood, you were out there on the front lines. That was the important work. You were in front of the customers. That's the critical piece. That's where we're going to focus all of our recognition efforts, right? And link it to the values of the organization. So gifts were often with regards to about the home, because that was what the culture was, is that IKEA is about building your home. But even if I go into healthcare or other organizations where, for that front line, some of the links are about how to access that group. You know what I mean? And again, it's through the leaders and making sure the leaders are having those conversations, because the recognition can be the formal system, but it was also really important to have that leader say, I saw what you did with that customer today, or I saw how you acted. That's really important. Or even structuring the work so those frontline employees are empowered to do their job, because then they realize how important it is. So that, let a cashier have the ability to take a return or to solve a problem without having to go 4 layers up and put the customer aside and wait, and I'm going to have to hand you off over here, etc. Right? Like that those things were really important, and it tied to recognition and engagement. When you talk to the employees about why they liked working there, it's because they felt recognized that, I'm the last person that sees the employee as a cashier or sees the customer as a cashier. And so what I say really matters at the end of the line, right here, right now. The greeters, somebody helping you find your way through the maze, and at the end, your end point in the cashier. Those are important, and let them know they were important.
IKEA is the only store that needs to hire people to guide them through the store.
Well, I wouldn't say we really hired them for that. I mean, it's more like arrows on the floor, and it's okay if you're lost for a little while. There's hot dogs at a really good price, and there's a ballroom for the kids.
Brilliant business model. We're just going to get people lost in here, and they're going to end up buying all sorts of stuff for their home. Kristi, I want to come back to you just on the recognition piece. Thinking about Starbucks and all the different locations that they have, how did the organization get different locations to build kind of like a microculture of recognition kind of consistently across the organization?
I think that it really a lot of things come down to an amazing training program, right? So if you have that consistency at every store, whether you're experiencing that as an employee or a customer, it really stemmed from an amazing talent development and learning and development team. So that there was that consistency. So if somebody was going to, when I think of like recognition, it wasn't just like, here's the tool, here's the pretty card with the beautiful illustration. It was like, here's how we look at recognition. Here's how you can do it. This is what great looks like. And I'm going to model that for you now as the leader. But like when it comes to recruitment and leadership, the training was just unbelievable. Like I got to spend 8 full hours with every store manager that joined the company to teach them how to hire. That's not like always the case, right? Like it might be at great companies like IKEA and Starbucks, but that's not always the case. That a lot of times training is needed for the people that are hiring people to make sure that culture grows and expands, and but that there's some alignment there in who we're bringing onto the organization. But yeah, when got to work for 8 hours with a store manager, they would have, just like they got with me for recruitment, they would get that on every different aspect that they needed as a leader, recognition being one of them. How to train, how to onboard, how to recognize. That was all part of the Starbucks training program. So a lot of things lead back to training.
And Shelly at IKEA, or Kristi at Starbucks, on the recognition piece, would that typically then be kind of like the total rewards team at a large organization that would go in, or would the total rewards team work with kind of the talent development, the learning and development teams, and then they would kind of execute on the training at the store level?
So at Starbucks, there was a lot of teams involved, but employee experience would have been one of the larger teams. You're testing me now because I'm going back a few years to think about who it was, but it's big, right? Like they now have like a full dedicated Starbucks partners website and team. Like I just spoke with somebody about like a new Starbucks alumni program that's dedicated to returning employees. Like it's such a huge maze, right? Of people, but it far beyond total rewards. The recognition was really at that strategic values mission level.
And so like Shelly at IKEA, was it the total rewards team that would come up with kind of like the recognition strategy and then kind of work with the employee experience team to get that out?
Very much. It was, total rewards would kind of look at what's going on a kind of across the country. Let's say we were IKEA Canada across the country basis, but building with the culture. And in exactly, Kristi, the learning and development team was huge. Like that was so big because IKEA felt, and I personally feel this way, there's nothing better than being recruited by a leader or manager that's able to really tell you how exciting it is to work there and tell you about your benefits and tell you about your recognition and tell you about your rewards, right? That they're not passing you off and going, oh, okay, well, human resources will tell you the answers to all of these questions that are burning for you about what it's like to work here. Instead, you had leaders because they were trained by, learning and development and the recruitment teams as well as the rewards teams to be able to answer all those questions and have them at the, to talk that story about how rewarding it was to work here and what recognition meant to them and what it would be like. So that in itself was huge, like that linkage in. And I know you haven't asked me about Starbucks, but it's really interesting. I wanted to say, Kristi, I think one of the neat things with a microculture is the linkages to the community that each Starbucks location kind of has, where they're finding out what's important in that community that they're sitting in and having their employees understand that so that they build the rapport with the regular customers and what it's like. And, it's a big difference on how you're functioning if you're the, I'm going to say go back a few years, but if you're in the path downtown Toronto with the business offices first thing in the morning versus you're in, a sleepy Burlington downtown where people are taking their time and not so urgent, right? And I love how Starbucks deals with that from a frontline perspective.
From very early in my career, it was the expectation, like the way that I started recruiting was with it being a reflective of the consumer, right? So it was just immediately a very diverse recruitment strategy. And I don't know, when you say that, it takes me back.
So Kristi, kind of thinking a little bit more broadly again, like what are the biggest mistakes that frontline companies make that can cause them to lose staff?
Retention, just straight up retention for a second. You don't want to talk about recognition anymore.
Broadly, retention.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely like this, the research shows us, right, that there's a lot of disengagement right now. And in certain industries that are frontline, there's also been a certain amount of burnout and turnover even, right, where certain areas were essential, certain areas weren't essential. And so then some businesses were closed so long that other people had to go on and change directions in their career. So in some of the areas that I've been recruiting in, we're pulling people back into industries that they had left for a period of time. And so I just think that when I think of retention, I think of right now, what's top of mind for me is burnout, and not like really setting up the workload and the workplace in a way that allows for some balance, well-being, kind of like, balance seems like such a, I don't know, not a strong enough word, but I see that. And I think that, a lot of times when there was always burnout, when people were in customer facing roles, it was always there. But when you overlap what's been happening in industries and how quickly priorities have been shifting, there's another level of burnout right now, I think. And I think people have changed maybe what they expect from their employer a little bit. That's evolved. So I don't know. I think that's playing into it too. I think that, I don't know. I feel like I don't necessarily have a great answer for you, but I think that fulfilling and satisfying work is what people need. And companies need to have a very clear vision and a very intentional strategy around retention right now at the Frontline.
So a blog that we recently published talked about burnout, and the number one thing that like companies need to do is just provide kind of like clear objectives and metrics. And to your point, like if they're switching metrics all the time, or they have 7 different objectives, it's too much to ask people to do. Like, let's identify the big rocks, let's go after that, and let's cut everything else. And whether you're frontline or not, like even here at Guusto, like we got to continue to kind of get better at this. Shelly, what have you seen on your side?
I think there's still too many organizations with frontline workers that treat them as easily replaceable. They're still not getting it, even with what's going on with recruitment, and retention for that group. They just, I'll get you another one. Like they're not understanding that group needs more and should have more, and they're not keeping in touch with that people. They've got like a huge span of control for those leaders. So the leaders have, far too many employees to really be there for in their organizations, or like their span of control is just so big, or there's so many layers up to where decisions can be made that affect those frontline workers. So they feel, like not like they don't have an impact. They don't have an impact on their objectives. They don't have impact on the work that they're doing. And so why stick around, right? Leaders have too much work that's taking them away from leading and not being able to sit there and be with their employees and listen and fix things and make things better. I just think we've got to echo Kristi, like provide ways for that group, look for ways to provide more flexibility. It's almost like a cost value analysis in terms of, if I was working from home, I wouldn't have to pay for commuting. And if I was working from home, I could be there when my kids come home from school. And if I was working from home, I could do some laundry and I can get some fresh air. So it's how do we make the jobs where you can't work from home and be frontline have something that's going to give them that added value? So is there some flexibility that you can provide for those workers? Like are the EAP programs to help them find their daycare, because now they're going to have to be looking for daycare again, or places for their kids to go after school. And I read somewhere where people were asking about this in the office, or it wasn't even an office, like the workplace provided that your kids, when they finished school, could come there after school and hang out and do their homework until their parents finished their shift to take them home. And that some people said that was huge. It made the difference for them to be able to come back to work, because that was the big thing about when they were working from home. They didn't have to worry about children coming home to an empty house. You know what I mean? So I think it's looking at that to try to make it work for those people, for those frontline workers that have to be there in front of everybody day to day to day, to give them some of that balance, as you said, Kristi, of that flexibility, all the things that to offset what they're not getting by not being able to be at home.
I'm going to pull on this thread a little bit more. Kristi, has the rise of remote work made frontline retention more challenging? And like, what can HR leaders do to retain staff who are attracted to working remotely?
I think that remote is such a hot topic right now in HR. And I think there's like early adopters that are doing it really well. And then I think there's some people that are just like dragging, like kicking and screaming. They don't want to go do it. And I think it absolutely impacts frontline recruitment. But I think that we have to factor it in. And what Shelly said about flexibility makes total sense to me. Like, maybe I'm a frontline employee, but I now want the flexibility to take a half an hour break where I go get my kids and take them somewhere after school and come back to work. Like, I need an employer that's going to think creatively. And that when it comes to talent advising, that gets me really excited because I love innovative solutions. And I think that's what we're going to start to see is there's going to be room for really creative solutions for employers. So, I always used to joke that maybe we'd be able to keep people that are like 20 something in these frontline jobs that are at minimum wage if we could just give them like a 4-minute texting break, like every hour. And people were like, that's insane. And I was like, what if we put a special pocket in their apron that's for their phone? They're like, no, we don't want them to have their phone on them. But like, that's what they want. And like, we need creative solutions. And like, if I could have my phone on me at one employer and not have it on me at the other, for some people that might be like, it sounds crazy to me. I'm 40 years old and I'm like, I love any reason that my phone dies or is away from me. But like, there is a generation that really likes that. And so I think we have to be focused on creative solutions that center around flexibility, like Shelly said. Remote work. What is it about remote work that appeals to people, right? Once you know what's the real hook for them, then I think you can come up with a creative solution, even at the front line. But we have a long way to go because scheduling and traditional ways that this workplace is structured, it's like we're not quite ready for it yet, I think, in a lot of ways. Yeah.
On your point on kind of mobile phones, for recognition programs to work a lot of the time, like giving employees access to the software, like they don't have computers, right? So if they want to participate in a digital program, like they need to have their mobile phone, or the company needs, Shelly, I think you've talked about how IKEA would kind of put tablets in the stores. But then also, beyond recognition programs, kind of employee training programs and general announcements. If we don't have everybody on kind of company email addresses or whatnot, mobile phones are a good way to kind of get things out through push notifications, through text messages and whatnot. So it seems a little bit backwards that employers are telling the frontline who want to have their mobile phones with them that they can't.
I love your stuff about the mobile phones, Kristi. Like, I mean, I could just picture, like it's okay to post yourself having fun at work on Instagram, right? And when you scroll through, there are a lot of organizations that are starting to click into that. And you see those employees posting themselves at work because they're so happy with their team or whatever. This is what my day at work looks like when I work at such and such a place. See how much fun we have. What a great place to work. I mean, that's all part of building that culture and that value and make it a place that people want to come and work. Because like you said, everybody's different about what it is about remote working that they like. And so find that sweet spot and provide it in a creative way for the non-remote workers. That's the challenge.
This has been an awesome discussion. Kristi, thanks so much for joining us. Shelly, thanks for taking the time. Did you have any interesting kind of takeaway from the conversation on how you might kind of better help your clients retain frontline workers, Kristi?
I love just the community and connecting with you guys, because I think that's something that I've missed in the last few years, is just sharing and having conversation. I think we need to do more of that in order to think creatively. So that's what I'm taking away. So I need more of this in my daily life.
Awesome. Shelly, any big kind of light bulb moment for you?
Yeah, just I feel like there's a sense of like we need to go backwards to learn to go forwards. I keep thinking about when I was writing out ideas around the flexibility and what we need to do to provide for that, so that what do employees need? I was thinking about back in the 80s and 90s, job sharing was huge, right? Especially for young parents and things. And I think, is that something that's going to come back? So that, you know what I mean? You just that whole job sharing, on-site daycare, all of those kinds of things. There's got to be something to sort through with your employees, what's important to them and how do I provide that flexibility? Like you said, if it's a half hour during the day or 15 minutes during the day, to allow for that, because it makes such a difference, or where I can change my shifts up on certain days or certain times. Right. So I want the consistency of knowing what my schedule is, but maybe there's flexibility built in there too for what we need.
Mm-hmm. My big takeaway, Kristi, this was fantastic. But just the importance of recognition, being in the moment on the front line, and how we kind of provide tools and programs that allow for that. So I'll take that kind of insight back to our team, and also just the importance of sticking with goals and kind of not kind of changing the ship direction kind of too often, because that can really disengage employees. So some great takeaways there. All right. Well, have a wonderful day, Shelly and Kristi. It's been really nice to kind of chat with you, and we'll look forward to kind of staying in touch on LinkedIn. If you want to build a culture that your employees won't want to leave, check out Culture is the Ultimate Advantage, our free guide to turning your culture into your company's greatest strength. Click the link in the description to get your copy. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please hit the like button and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Don't forget to recognize somebody for a job well done today. Mucho gusto.